Hello and welcome to BBC London News with me, Riz Latif. So, Jeremy Corbyn has appointed a fellow London MP and fellow left-winger to the most important job in his Labour top team. John McDonald, who has spoken of a desire to overthrow capitalism, is now Shadow Chancellor in charge of the party's economic strategy. What will his radical views on airport expansion, housing and the city mean if they were to form a government? This from our political editor, Tim Donovan.
The new Labour leader thinks Heathrow is big enough, and his right-hand man feels it even more passionately.
Order!
You can't see him here, but you can hear him.
Order! The Honourable...
John McDonald was once suspended for 5 days for shouting at the then Labour Transport Secretary.
I name the Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington.
Few now expect Labour's current stance of conditional support for Heathrow expansion to last long.
There will be a debate within Parliament itself. I'm hoping that the Prime Minister will allow a thorough debate, and in that way we'll come to a conclusion. I'll be arguing against a third runway at Heathrow because of the devastating environmental impact.
One former Labour minister and paid consultant for Heathrow told me today he hoped McDonald's personal position wouldn't prevail.
I think it would be a great mistake if they just turn around and assume that they've got the right to overturn the policies that we've had for some time.
And you say that the unions wouldn't back him on that?
Well, they certainly don't. I mean, the union's view is, I think there's one trade union which is against or neutral or so, but the rest are in favour.
I am fed up with the social cleansing of London by this Tory government and its policies.
In his victory speech, the new leader made one thing very clear. He wants to pump more public money into affordable housing and give more borrowing freedoms to councils.
His most unique offer is definitely that he wants to reduce house prices in the UK. No other politician out there has been saying that right now. He also wants to reduce rents, and the way he wants to do that on both parts is by building more homes. The problem with that, of course, is that he's doing it by also clobbering the private market and interfering with the housing market in some quite blunt manners.
After the recent dispute over night services on the tube, many will wonder whether a Corbyn leadership will embolden unions in the capital.
I think it'll be fantastic. He's already pledged investment. He's already pledged the cap fares. So I think he's going to have a far better working relationship with the unions.
We've got to get this dispute in the tube solved at the earliest opportunity. And I would hate to think that Jeremy Corbyn's election somehow sort of gives a green light for further trades union militancy.
What does seem likely is that with these two having spent 50 years between them as Labour MPs in London, the capital's issues could well come to the fore. Tim Donovan, BBC London News.
We heard there from John McDonald, but what about the other London MPs, Labour MPs given top jobs? Our political correspondent Carl Mercer has been speaking to the other three, all women, who will be serving in Corbyn's shadow cabinet.
I'm Heidi Alexander and I am now, as of yesterday, the Shadow Secretary of State for Health.
David Mellor, Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury.
There you go. It's the first time you said that, isn't it?
It is, actually.
My name is Diane Abbott. I'm the Member of Parliament for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. And Shadow Secretary of State for International Development.
One of them backed Andy Burnham to be their new leader, one backed Yvette Cooper and one backed Jeremy Corbyn. Three differing views of where the Labour Party should be, now in the same shadow cabinet. It was only 4 years ago that Seema Malhotra started her career in Parliament, winning a by-election in Feltham, celebrated by Labour's previous leader.
This by-election offers a verdict on the government's failed economic plan.
Hi there.
Now she will be one of those formulating Labour's economic plan.
We won't actually see the deficit come down unless we have growth. And actually coming together on growth is a shared agenda, it's a common agenda, making sure we've got an environment that's good for business and entrepreneurship as well. So we've got a lot of work to do across the whole party together.
This was where the new Shadow Health Secretary cut her teeth in the politics of the health service. Heidi Alexander played a big part in the campaign to keep Lewisham's A&E open, but was, by her own admission, surprised to get the call to head Labour's health team.
I certainly wasn't anticipating being offered the job that I have been, but I did say yes relatively quickly because I think it's really important that people like me accept the responsibility to be part of making the Labour Party a credible and effective opposition.
Last week, Diane Abbott lost out in the race to be Labour's candidate for London Mayor to Sadiq Khan. But a long-time Corbyn ally, she's now in the shadow cabinet looking after international development.
If you're interested in development, you should not be supporting bombing Syria. Nothing has done more to harm development in the Middle East than all these Western military incursions.
Those are views that won't chime with all in her own party or indeed all in the shadow cabinet. It is expected to meet tomorrow for the first time. Carl Mercer, BBC London News.
Well, ahead of that, let's get reaction from the former London Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, and David Mellor, who served in the Conservative cabinet under John Major, who joins me here in the studio. Welcome to you both. Ken Livingstone, you obviously welcome Corbyn as leader. Are you not concerned at all how he translates this huge win among party members to a potential win at the next general election amongst the public?
Well, I wouldn't have voted for Jeremy if I didn't think he could win the general election, because I want a better Britain for my kids. But I do think he does connect with people, and he's got a coherent economic strategy. We've just had years of austerity. The economy is still limping along. We've got the biggest trade deficit since I was in primary school. We need to go for growth. We need to get real investment, modernise our infrastructure. You look at the way London's boomed over the last 15 years. That's based on the billions of pounds I got to invest in our transport infrastructure and around the Olympic site. That then attracts private investment to come along around the transport nodes you've created.
David Mellor, Corbyn's vision is connecting with people.
Well, we don't know. It's connected with enough people to make him Labour leader, but it is an astonishing result. And the question is whether it will connect more widely. It's interesting that Frances O'Grady, in her speech at the TUC conference today, instead of welcoming him unequivocally, suggested that he needed to be careful that the TUC didn't need a fan club. They needed a bunch of politicians who could actually commend themselves to a wider public. And there's no evidence that Corbyn can do that, because so much of his message is just so left-wing. He's almost dropping off the edge of the planet.
What do you say to that, Ken Livingstone?
Well, that's exactly what everyone said about me all through my political career. I managed to win, I think, 11 elections out of 14. And well, remember, Tony Blair said I'd be a disaster and all of that. 3 years after I became mayor, he said, well, please come back and be our candidate. Jeremy Corbyn is focused on what he can do for ordinary people. And ordinary people have been left behind. I mean, a small elite of super rich people have seen their incomes soar over the last few years. Most people, middle class and working class, are really struggling to make ends meet. And Jeremy's got the series of policies that will create good jobs for them, build homes that we can afford.
What do you say, Ken Livingstone, to people who say, in reaction to that, those all sound very popular, but they're just not realistic?
They're absolutely realistic. The Bank of England just created £375 billion of new money to prop up the banking system. It didn't cause inflation, it's done no damage to the economy. So if we can create money to save the banks, why not create money to make a modern, high-tech economy that would attract investment from abroad?
David Mellor, do you accept that London's interests are better represented, with London MPs now filling the shadow cabinet posts, as we heard in Carl Mercer's report?
No, I don't. No, I don't, because I think, what are London's interests? Is it really in London's interests, as John McDonald is saying, he wants to nationalise all the banks? Is it in London's interests that a whole lot of privatised industries are going to go back into public ownership at heaven knows what cost, or there are people who have shares will be confiscated? It's also not going to be in London's interest. One of the most interesting things about Jeremy Corbyn is a man of the street and not a man of Parliament. There's going to be a lot more demonstrations. I think there's going to be a lot more violence. You can tell in relation to this trade union bill that's being debated today. People will be out on the streets. Corbyn will not restrain them. I think it's not going to be very pleasant to live in London over the next couple of years.
What do you think?
But if you actually look at that trade union bill, I mean, here we've got a government saying you've got to get 50% of the vote before you can go on strike. This government won 25% of British voters, and yet it's governing like a complete autocracy. It's really ridiculous to actually take away people's right to fight to get decent wages and decent conditions at work, and introduce all these sorts of things that will try and stop that. The more you make workers poor, the less they spend, the less the economy goes. Okay. It was, one of the founders of modern capitalism, Henry Ford, who actually paid his workers, and he said, I want them to earn enough to buy the cars they're making.
OK, Ken Livingstone and David Mellor, we must leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Thank you both.
Cheers.